when a man found a shivering newborn on the roadside. He believed he had saved a helpless puppy. He fed it, cared for it, and built a bond. But when the vet examined the fragile creature, his face drained of color. He stepped back, whispering, in shock, "This isn't a puppy." What they discovered next left everyone speechless and terrified. It was a quiet evening when Daniel, a kind-hearted man returning home from work, spotted movement by the roadside. At first, he thought it was nothing more than a piece of cloth blown by the wind. But then, a faint cry reached his ears, soft, fragile, desperate. Curiosity pulled him closer, and there, shivering in the grass, was a tiny creature no bigger than the palm of his hand. Its eyes were barely open, and its fragile body trembled with every breath. Daniel's heart ached. To him, it looked like a helpless newborn puppy, abandoned and left to die. Without hesitation, he scooped the little one into his hands, feeling its tiny heartbeat fluttering against his skin. "Don't worry, little guy," he whispered. "You're safe now." At that moment, Daniel had no idea that this rescue would lead him into one of the most shocking discoveries of his life. Daniel rushed home, wrapping the tiny creature in his scarf to shield it from the cold. Once inside, he prepared a small box lined with soft blankets and gently placed the newborn inside. Its cries quieted, though its tiny body still shook, as though clinging to life itself. Unsure of what to feed it, Daniel warmed some milk and carefully dripped it onto a small cloth. To his relief, the little one began to suckle, its big eyes blinking up at him as though recognizing safety for the first time. That moment carved a place in Daniel's heart. He was no longer just helping a stray, he was saving a life. Hours turned into days, and the bond between man and creature grew. It would curl into his hands whenever he picked it up, falling asleep to the sound of his heartbeat. Neighbors who stopped by smiled, praising Daniel for his kindness. To them, he was a hero. To Daniel, this was destiny, though deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling there was something unusual about his new companion. At first, Daniel dismissed the oddities as quirks of a newborn. But as days passed, little details began gnawing at him. The creature's eyes seemed far larger than those of any puppy he'd seen, gleaming like polished glass even in the dim light. Its ears, too, appeared unusually long, twitching at the faintest sound. When Daniel held it, he noticed its claws, thin, sharp, and slightly curved, unlike the soft nails of a dog. Even its tiny tail moved differently, curling and flicking in ways that reminded him more of a wild animal than a pet. He laughed nervously, telling himself puppies grow into their features. But deep down, unease was taking root. Neighbors began to comment as well. "That doesn't look much like a puppy," one remarked cautiously. Another suggested it might be a strange crossbreed. Daniel tried to smile, brushing off their words, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Finally, unable to shake his suspicions, he made a decision. Cradling the fragile creature in his hands, he whispered, "Let's get you checked, little one." The next morning, Daniel set off for the vet, unaware that the truth waiting there would leave him shaken to his core. The clinic was quiet when Daniel walked in, the tiny creature bundled carefully in a blanket. The receptionist smiled warmly, expecting to see a stray pup, but her smile faltered as soon as she peeked inside. She said nothing, only motioned for Daniel to wait as the vet was called. Dr. Miller, a seasoned veterinarian with years of experience, entered the room with his usual calm demeanor. He took the bundle from Daniel, unwrapping it slowly. For a few seconds, he said nothing. His practiced hands examined the creature's ears, claws, and tiny frame with precision. Then his face changed. His color drained, his eyes widening as though he'd just seen something that didn't belong in his office. Daniel's heart thudded. Is something wrong?" he asked, his voice catching. The vet set down his stethoscope, still staring at the small being cradled in his hands. He looked at Daniel, his voice low and trembling. "This isn't a puppy," he whispered. The room fell into a chilling silence. Daniel leaned forward, his pulse racing. If it wasn't a puppy, then what had he brought home? Dr. Miller cleared his throat, still staring at the trembling creature in his hands. "Daniel," he began carefully, "what you've been caring for, it's not a puppy at all." He paused, letting the words sink in. "This is a wild animal, a baby coyote." The weight of his revelation filled the room. Daniel's jaw dropped. His mind raced back through every moment. The oversized eyes, the sharp claws, the strange way its tail flicked. Suddenly, it all made sense. What he thought was an abandoned puppy was, in fact, a predator from the wild, fragile now, but destined to grow into something very different. The volunteers nearby gasped. One whispered, "How did it end up here?" Dr. Miller sighed. "Sometimes mothers are forced to abandon the weakest in their litters, or accidents separate them. This little one was lucky you found it." Daniel looked at the creature nestled in the blanket. His heart ached, because to him, no matter what the vet had said, it was still the life he had fought to save. Dr. Miller set the coyote pup gently back into the blanket, his expression grave. "Daniel, I know you meant well," he said softly. "But coyotes aren't like dogs. As they grow, their instincts change. They can become unpredictable, territorial, even dangerous, not just to others, but to themselves if raised in captivity." Daniel swallowed hard, his eyes flicking between the vet and the small creature curled in his arms. He had fed it, kept it warm, listened to its tiny cries at night. To him, it wasn't a wild animal. It was a soul he had promised to protect. The vet continued, his tone firm but kind. "If it stays with humans, it won't learn how to survive in the wild. It needs other coyotes, the freedom of open land. Keeping it here would only harm it in the long run." The room fell silent, the reality pressing heavily on Daniel's heart. He nodded slowly, though pain etched across his face. Deep down, he knew the vet was right. Loving this fragile creature meant making the hardest choice of all, letting it go where it truly belonged. Daniel sat in the waiting room long after the vet's words had faded. The coyote pup lay curled in his lap, fast asleep, its tiny chest rising and falling with fragile breaths. He stroked its soft fur, fighting back the sting of tears. How could something so small already belong to the wild? Memories flashed. In his mind, the night he first heard its cries, the way it nestled against his heartbeat, the bond that had grown in just a few short days. To Daniel, it wasn't a wild animal. It was a life he had promised to save, and the thought of saying goodbye felt unbearable. But deep inside, he knew the truth. Love wasn't about holding on. It was about doing what was best. As he looked down at the pup, his voice cracked. "I don't want to lose you, but you deserve the life you were meant for." The decision weighed heavy, but Daniel knew what he had to do. A week later, arrangements were made to transfer the coyote pup to a nearby wildlife sanctuary. The facility specialized in rehabilitating young animals, giving them the skills to survive in the wild. Daniel arrived early that morning, cradling the tiny creature in the same blanket he had first rescued it in. At the sanctuary gates, a caretaker greeted him warmly. She explained how the pup would be nurtured, taught to hunt, and eventually released back into its natural habitat. Her words reassured him, but his heart still ached as he held the little one for what might be the last time. As Daniel placed the pup gently into the caretaker's arms, it whimpered softly, its wide eyes lingering on him for a moment. He whispered, "Be strong, little one. Live the life you were meant to." Turning away, tears blurred his vision, but deep down he knew saving it meant letting it go. Weeks later, Daniel received an update from the sanctuary. The pup was thriving, stronger, louder, its wild instincts beginning to shine through. It was no longer the fragile, shivering creature he had found by the roadside. It was becoming what it was always meant to be, a survivor of the wild. Daniel smiled through tears as he read the report. Though he missed the pup deeply, pride swelled in his chest. He realized that true compassion isn't always about keeping, it's about giving. Sometimes, the bravest act of love is stepping back and allowing life to follow its natural path. Standing at the edge of his porch one evening, Daniel looked out at the horizon and whispered, "Be free, little one." And in that moment, he understood the bond they shared would never fade. It was proof that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever.